Okay, so just FYI, Jennifer likes to be called Jag, so I'm going to be referring her as Jag throughout this conversation. So Jag and I met a few years ago at a business conference. A colleague of hers introduced the two of us. He was really excited about that introduction. And I remember my first impression of Jag, that she was so nice. And because I'm a suspicious Eastern European, I thought she was a little bit too nice. Like, why is she so nice? Why is she inviting me already to her Malibu home to host me there? I think this suspicion kind of held me back for a while. So for about a year, we didn't really get to have a deeper conversation. But then once we reconnected, I was blown away by Jag. And then as I got to know her better, I understood that, that generosity and kindness and benevolence is just who she is as a person. And she is that generous to a lot of people, especially young people. And I've witnessed that many times. So it's been a privilege being her friend. It's a huge privilege working with her, especially because, you don't find often people with whom you share vision. I think we have very similar visions. Jag wants to work or to put in work so that 1 billion people across the globe, young people, would read Ayn Rand's books. And, my personal and professional ambition is to turn that energy and that knowledge into a global social and political movement. So, our minds are very complementary. And when you find something like that, you want to hold on to it. And as if all of that wasn't enough, Jag also happens to be one of the most effective CEOs in the liberty movement. I don't mean just among the objectivist organizations, I mean across the board. So I thought that you guys should all get to know her a little bit better and learn from her very vast experience. So Jag, thank you for being here with us today. That's the first thing. And then I want to start with talking about your childhood because it's very interesting. So you were not born in the US, you were actually born in India, in New Delhi, to American Peace Corps volunteer parents. So that sounds like a very altruistic environment to grow up in. So would you say that there is a contrast between how you were raised, how you were growing up, and then your later embrace of objectivist philosophy?
Sure. And so my middle name, Anju, comes from India. It's a Hindi name. And I was born in the year when parents in America decided to name all of their daughters Jennifer. So there were so many Jennifers in my camp, in my classroom, that I started going by my initials. And in terms of my early upbringing, I am the only objectivist, Republican, libertarian in a family of very progressive Democrats. How many other people in the audience have a belief system that's very different than the one in which you were raised? Quite a few, yes. So that always left me feeling a little bit alienated. I will say one thing about the Peace Corps, however, and that is that in a sense, you can see it as a welfare abroad or foreign aid or some kind of, transfer scheme. But you have to remember that this was under Kennedy, and he was in some ways a remarkable Cold Warrior, a hawk, and he was also the original supply sider with his tax cuts, taking the top tax rate down from like 90 to 70 and lower. So the Peace Corps was not just about do-goodism, it was also about soft power. And we knew that the Soviet Union was out in Latin America, in other places, trying to infiltrate and work among the people to get labor activists and this and that. And so this was also an effort to go abroad and show American know-how and American way. But yes, I definitely grew up in a very liberal household, and growing up, I don't think I ever met a Republican. I just grew up with the impression that all Republicans or conservatives or libertarians were either stupid or somehow malevolent and malicious, sadistic. And it wasn't actually until I went to Harvard and I met a few Republicans, and there weren't that many, that I said, whoa, these people don't seem to be particularly nefarious or ill-intentioned, and some of them are quite a bit smarter than me. So perhaps somewhere along the line, I was misinformed, and I might need to go back and check my premises.
So you were still quite young when you moved back to the United States. You went to school there, and then an experience that you discussed quite a few times is how you were bullied as a child because you came from this very different culture. You were a little bit different. So how did you make sense of that experience, and how do you interpret it now through the objectivist lens?
Sure. Well, I want to clarify because, we tend to think of kids being bullied because they're fat or they have a lisp or they have a limp or what have you. So when we say different, we need to say how I was different. And I will be frank, I was prettier, I was smarter, I got better grades, I had better clothes, I was richer. Sorry, but not sorry. I was being bullied not for weaknesses, but for strengths. And I had a very hard time understanding this. And, of course, my parents were like, well, we should invite this girl who is threatening you and chasing you around the campus, invite her into our home. And if we're just nice and we can come to some understanding, then perhaps it will stop. And I bought into some of this, and I would just kind of ask them in desperation at one point, what do you want from me? What will it take for you to stop threatening me? And she said, I want you to die. And I thought, well, I don't want to die. I love my life. I'm not going to kill myself. So to hell with you. And but I think still, I was in the third grade, so I was a child. I didn't really understand what this was. And I didn't have parents who could explain it for me because, of course, these poor children that were being bussed in from the inner city, their moral, we must, of course, pay amends and make excuses and make allowances and all of that. And so it really wasn't until I read Ayn Rand and I discovered the concept of envy and the hatred of the good for being the good that it really began to make sense to me. And that's part of why I just found objectivism so compelling.
And then you went to university, first Columbia, then Harvard. You graduated with honors and moved to Washington, D.C. to join the political scene there. So you joined George H.W. Bush's campaign, became his speechwriter. And I'm interested, first of all, what drew you to that type of career, and then what it took, because you were fairly young, obviously very ambitious, but you made it in a very competitive environment very early on in your career. So what did it take?
Well, I think that, perhaps that early beginning in the Peace Corps and with these parents that were do-gooders, I did imbibe a sense that I wanted to make a difference in the world and I wanted to elevate the world in some way. But again, I was still making this transition from statist to objectivist. And so it was, well, if I'm going to make a difference in the world, I need to go to the government town and I need to go to the White House. My first job in DC was working as a production assistant at the ABC affiliate there. And in college, I had met some conservatives from the American Spectator and the National Review, and they said, oh, no, you need to be in the White House. And I said, well, I'm not really a Republican. Well, just be quiet about that. You're smart. You'll go in there. You'll figure out a way. So I started as a research assistant in the speechwriting department. And I realized very quickly that the other people that were there were either there because they had volunteered for the campaign or perhaps because their parents were donors. But I was just the only one that was there because of a connection and also because of merit. And I realized that, I couldn't necessarily control for other factors. And this is important because this has helped guide my entire career. What I could control for was how hard I worked. So I always made sure that I would be there 1 hour before everybody else arrived. I would be there 1 hour later. I would work weekends. I had a cot in my office. You could smoke in the White House in those days. So that was pretty cool. And so I just outworked. Now, this was a time, by the way, there was no cell phones, there was no internet. If you had to write a speech, you had to go up into the OEOB office library and come back down with an armful of books of old speeches and read them. And I think that is, unfortunate, something that has been lost when you don't read. It's not just the content of what you're reading. The very act of reading is strengthening the neural connections in your brain. And so if you're not a reader, I would encourage you to try to get into the habit of it, if for nothing more than for mental hygiene. So that is really part of how it was partly hard work, but I would also say that the previous experience in terms of working for a television, station and working, writing for a very popular kind of Oprah-esque talk show made me very early on think about audience. Who is the audience? What is the effect on the audience? What is the effect of the words, of the sounds of the words? Because when you're working in television, you just have a very few words to work with. And so I was very early on thinking about the applause lines and the humor. And so at first, speechwriters would give me their speeches to punch it up, to put in the applause lines. I also had in this particular White House, it was not like sometimes they'll have a pool of researchers and a pool of speechwriters. We were assigned to a speechwriter. And my speechwriter, speaking of paleo-conservatives, was a Pat Buchanan Republican. He hated the president, so he also liked to drink quite a bit. So he would go out for a lot of the day, and I would say, well, no problem. I'll just whip up a draft for you. So I was speech writing for a speech writer, and this was an open secret. So eventually, in the later years, I had a fair boss, and I said, I've been writing speeches all this time. I think it's just that you give me my commission.
You didn't kind of stay in that career, though you switched careers a few times, which, from my experience, from my kind of perspective, this gives you this very, very broad perspective. So at one point you also worked in corporate leadership and particularly at the Dole Food Company, where you founded the Dole Nutrition Institute. So what brought you to the shift in your career, and did it have to do anything with your kind of philosophical thinking? Because as far as I know, this came after your work at Cato.
Yes. I will say something about that, because this may happen to some of you in your career. I know that I was a little disappointed by the peripatetic nature of my career. I, thought, especially in those days, I'll start at this one place and I'll work my way up and I'll get to the head. But instead, I was television, and then I'm in the government, and then I'm at a think tank, and then I'm at a company, and I'm doing writing, and I'm doing producing, and I'm doing marketing. I'm doing all of these different things. But what I realized now in retrospect was that by playing all of the different instruments in the symphony, what it prepared me to do was be the conductor, so that when I came to be in an executive position where I was leading a whole bunch of young people, that I could tell them, oh, this is how you do the clarinet, and this is how you do the drums. So that was very helpful. I can't say that my move to the private sector was planned, but I think it was, in retrospect, I'm very grateful for it, because I think when you're working in government, even when you're a Republican working in government, these people from business would come in, you'd be like, who are they? Now, when you're actually working in business, you realize, competition and the costs and everything that's going on. And it was also there when I went to Dole Food Company. I thought, okay, I'm going to be marketing, and these are our, these are our consumers. And I had to realize that the people that are giving us our money are the customers, and those are the retailers, those are the grocery stores. The people that are giving them money are the consumers. Those are the people that are buying from the grocery store. And I think that learning about that distinction between customers and consumers helped me when I came to run a nonprofit, because it helped me understand a distinction between the consumers, okay, who are the young people that we serve with our programs, and the customers, which is where we get our money. And I spend about half of my life, my waking life, on the road, traveling, meeting with donors, making the case for them to give us money to pay for your flights and pay for your hotel rooms and pay for your programs. And so understanding that I need to provide value both to the consumers and to the customers.
So just to take a step back to your days at the Cato Institute, this is where a colleague of yours asked you one day who is John Galt, and you didn't know the reference, so you went and read Atlas Shrugged, and you said that that book then changed your life. So what was it about the book that resonated so deeply with you at that time in your life?
Well, I think, of course, the protagonist, the heroine, resonated with me. I think that it's something maybe any of us, but particularly young women, can resonate with in terms of being in a situation, trying to make it work, believing that you can turn things around, overextending yourselves, and then finding yourselves exhausted. So I think it was that, but then also this realization that evil is ultimately impotent, and that it can only survive in a parasitical fashion by the good allowing itself to be taken advantage of. And then, of course, her undiluted, unapologetic moral defense of capitalism. And I think that was something that I hadn't really heard before. And again, just, of course, her discussion and her description of envy. And to me, I think that envy explains so much of what we see in the world, so many of the current protests, including the anti-Semitism, the anti-Israel protests, are in large part motivated by people seeing something, and rather than saying, how can I also create, a great civilization, or rise, or learn, or collaborate, rather to have this irrational, nihilistic, and destructive impulse to want to tear something down.
So in 2016, when you took over the Atlas Society, the organization was at the crossroads. It was at that time still led by David Kelly, from what I remember. And David is this genius philosopher. He's a remarkable person that I had a privilege to meet. But I think he has a very different style of leading an organization than you do. So what was your vision at that time for the organization? What was the major change that you wanted to make?
Yes. So I like to say that, before I was talking about customers and consumers, I think that there's two different models of nonprofits. One is the symphony, where the customers and the consumers are the same. The other is the soup kitchen, where the customers and the consumers are different. Previously, the Atlas Society was more of a symphony model, okay? So it had summer conferences for objectivists who would go year after year. The customer and the consumer was the same. This was not going to be a sustainable model. The customers were maturing, and I could not see, how we were necessarily going to replace them. It was also not something that was particularly interesting to me. I'm not interested in running a museum or building a museum or just kind of maintaining and conserving the past. I'm very, very much interested in the new, in innovation. I also just thought this was a tremendous opportunity because in the, 20 years or so that I had been in the private sector, there had been so much innovation. If you are in a think tank, what are you really doing? You are in the business of transacting ideas. And the way that we are able to transact ideas had been completely revolutionized with digital media, online, social media. And I remember when I was at Dole Food Company, I went to the Cato Institute. I made a trip. I begged the CEO at the time, who was John Allison. I said, well, why aren't you taking advantage of this, to be reaching new audiences? And he said, no, we're just lobbying Congress. I'm like, well, how well has that worked out for you? So really, when I came to the Atlas Society, I was like, this is going to be fun because nobody else is doing this or not doing it very well. And so we really almost had a prime mover advantage in instituting these digital strategies. And that's why now the Atlas Society has the largest and most engaged audience in the digital space. We're on 6 platforms, and our YouTube alone is, I believe, almost 1.8 million subscribers.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about that. So one of the first very successful video series that you did and that's still ongoing is the Draw My Life series, which basically presents objectivist concepts and characters in this animated short format. So what inspired this approach, and how do you manage to balance this entertainment factor with the philosophical rigor?
Well, it was very simple, very, very practical. I was like, okay, who's our audience? What are they doing? What are they consuming? Where are they consuming it? How are they consuming it? And that's what guided my strategy. And at the time, there was a very popular kind of format of Draw My Life where celebrities were drawing on a whiteboard. My name is, I was born, my mother, my blah, 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 blah. And that was speed ramped. And so I said, well, we can take this and we can apply it to my name is Ayn Rand, my name is Objectivism, my name is Envy, my name is Victimhood, my name is Capitalism, all of these. And then also different characters. My name is Dagny, my name is Francisco, and my name is Ludwig von Mises, my name is Frederick Douglass. So that's really why we did it. It was also a cost consideration. When I came to the Atlas Society, it had a quarter of its current budget, hence the half of the year I spend online fundraising. So it was probably the least, most affordable option at the time.
So talking about Draw My Life, one of the videos that you did was of your own life. And
that was the test, that was the beta model. Yeah.
And you are obviously, as a CEO, the face of the organization, but I think you took that job to the next level. You've also for years been face of objectivism. Um, while objectivism is still a very controversial philosophy in the United States, last year, or was that last year, when you were assaulted at a university, when you were giving a speech. So, this is not a safe thing to do. It's not something that anyone can do. So, what does it take to put yourself out there as the face of this philosophy that has so much backlash?
Um, well, I think it takes objectivism. I think it takes not giving a you-know-what about what anybody thinks about me. And I think that once you can free yourself from caring too much about what others think about you, you would be surprised by what you're able to achieve. Now, I don't take it to an extreme, because of course you get extremely valuable feedback from your friends. And if you take that attitude and it hardens into something, I mean, I think Ayn Rand early on was able to block everything out so that she was able to walk across the tightrope of her remarkable achievement without listening to the people that were calling for her to fall and to fail. But at some point, if you become so rigid in your blocking out of feedback, you won't hear the voice that says, watch that next step. And those are the friendly voices that you want to hear. So I think, I know that the competitive man is motivated by the desire to achieve and not to beat the others, but I do have to struggle with my competitive instincts, and also I like to win, and this is my life work. I'm dedicated to it. This is our moonshot of engaging 1 billion young minds, so whatever it takes. And if it takes spending half of my year on the road being told no half of the time, or if it takes going to campus and getting a trans person to accuse me of somehow killing babies in Gaza, then we do what we need to do. And, and then we just take advantage of it. I mean, all right, fine, we got that on video, that assault. I'm gonna use it and raise money, so.
And you've been very hands-on with all of the creative projects. Many of them, if not most of them, were your brainchildren. So I wanted to talk about one of the most ambitious projects that the Alpha Society is working on right now, or the series of projects. The Alpha Society pioneered its own AI technology to then create with it short format videos, book trailers of Ayn Rand's books. So far, we did Atlas Shrugged, The Fountainhead. The newest one is Anthem, and we're working on the long format of that.
Yes, well, I can talk a little bit about that. I'll say just one quick aside about the hands-on approach. Very early on, I said, okay, we're going to do this Draw My Life of Ayn Rand. Somebody recommended a production partner. I will not say who that production partner was, because they are rather well known. And we're 3/4 through the project, and they said, you know what, you want too much control over this project. We don't want to work with you anymore. I was like, oh my God, I've just come to this new job, and now this is falling apart. And that's when somebody introduced me to Patrick Riesnover, who's become the creative partner in everything that we've done.
And he actually introduced us.
And he introduced us. And that partnership has become so strong. At this point, I'm really not involved. I have the idea. Sometimes he has the idea, and then we know what each other like, and I just let him go. But yes, early on I thought, well, book trailers. I mean, blockbuster novelists have video trailers of their books. Why is there no book trailer of Atlas Shrugged? I wanted to do this 9 years ago, but we didn't have the money to do it. And so when I saw actually technology conference. There's a video called Rock, Paper, Scissors, and it was taking live action actors in front of a green screen in a studio and then having a model that turns them into anime. I thought, well, this is it. This is the moment that I've been waiting for. And so that's what we did with Atlas Shrugged. That trailer is on our YouTube. It's been viewed 12 million times across platforms and doubled sales of the novel. And so that attracted funding for the Fountainhead and then Anthem. And now we are pursuing a full-length commercial film of Anthem. So I hope that you'll be able to see that in maybe a little bit more than a year.
And can you tell us a little bit more about what that process looks like? I know that you're voicing some of the characters in the book trailers, so just to give some glimpses to the audience of what it looks like backstage.
Sure, and we also followed up all of those trailers. If you go to our YouTube page, you'll see our search series. We researched what are the most frequent searches related to objectivism and Ayn Rand, and then we found out, okay, well, it's this random video and it's that video. So we then did fresh new videos for all of those searches, turning me into an anime character. And so those 6 videos are well on their way to grabbing the top spot for all of those. So it's going to be very, very interesting because the technology continues to improve. So in our first one, the actors look very much like the anime characters. Now we have the ability to make you look like John Galt and anybody look like the character. We designed the characters first, and then I could act it, Patrick could act it, anybody could act it. We can put whatever voice that we want to do, and then we use video game technology to design the environment, the world.
So I'm gonna move on to this last question, which might be, which might be a little bit emotional for you. And I talked yesterday about Charlie Kirk and his assassination. So Jag actually knew Charlie since he was a student. She watched him build Turning Point USA into the powerhouse organization it has become. And even though you disagree on some of his views and the views of the Turning Point, I think some of the key values were shared there. So I wanted to ask you about your perspective on his influence on spearheading a conservative student activism in the United States. What's your take? And what lessons can we take from his work?
So when I met Charlie, it was 10 years ago. He was 21. And at the time, he had told me that reading Atlas Shrugged was sort of his entry into the world of politics. And at the time, he described himself as an objectivist. Now, he had started Turning Point a few years before. So like when I would go to speak at a conference of young people, maybe there'd be a few hundred in the audience. Now if you go to a Turning Point conference, there's 6,000 at the Young Women's Leadership Summit. And he had a totally, of any person of any age, set of exceptional abilities, his eloquence and his organizational vision, and his ability to be articulate on his feet. I also thought there were so many innovations that he brought on at Turning Point, like including seeing that all of these colleges had student body governments that in some cases controlled like a budget of 30 million, and that there was this whole left-wing infrastructure that was grooming these kids and helping them capture these budgets. And then this was, again, driving the radicalization that you're seeing on campus. So he said, all right, we're going to have a campus victory project, and we're going to start identifying young people, and we're going to be smart about it. All right, who's the captain of the football team? You know, who are the most popular kids who are also patriotic? I think Turning Point, by its definition, you know, was kind of focusing on the wave tops, right? They weren't kind of going deep and philosophical. So I learned a lot. I would go to I was on their advisory board. I'd go to all of the investor meetings. I'd be taking notes. I'd be seeing what can we do to adapt. I mean, that was one of my first moves out of the box. I said, you know, they were using this company to do their social media. I hired them at the time. It was like a huge portion of our budget. But again, it was that foresight that eventually led to us having this very unique and dominant position in the digital space. And, you know, over time, Charlie became more and more religious. He, you know, decided that he was going to ally very tightly with Trump. So, you know, he definitely moved away from objectivism, but, you know, we can either focus on our differences, or we can focus on the things that we shared in common, including our support for the Constitution, for capitalism, and for America. And with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, we lost one of the most passionate and compelling defenders of those issues.
And do you think that the success of Turning Point USA could be replicated in our movement, in other countries? Do you have any kind of pointers for our student leaders here on how to do that and where to start?
Well, you know, I think it takes someone of exceptional ability. So, you know, if you are, or if you find that person, I mean, part of what is so devastating about Charlie is that, you know, people who met him when he was 17 knew that he was going to have a great role in our country. And I was absolutely convinced, as I know many, many people were, that he would be president someday. And so that's why his assassination struck us as a president, as like a future presidential assassination. So in that way, it was even more tragic. I mean, I think anything is possible, right? Who would have expected what happened in Argentina, right? So I think that I think it's possible. I think the thing that is most challenging from my perspective about Europe is that, you know, Charlie was able to raise $80 million, you know, a year for his organization. And I just don't see the philanthropic tradition in Europe because of the displacement effect of so many years of government welfare. So, you know, perhaps it starts with a consciousness among the new generation of entrepreneurs who don't decide to shrug and go to America, that there needs to be an investment in the future and in the shared future of their countries.
Thank you, Jack. We're gonna move on to the audience questions now. Just a sec.
So I'm a bit curious, when are you bringing the Draw My Life videos back? And when you do, can you please do one about Charlie Kirk? I think people would be moved to tears.
I will think about it. I mean, I think that's a good idea, but I almost, you know, because we had differences and because, you know, I would probably criticize some of his positions, I think the challenge would be how to do it and remain true to objectivism while also honoring him. But I'm going to give that a lot of thought. Thank you for the idea. And, you know, we may return to the Draw My Life, but again, these were like, they were in their heyday a decade ago. I think maybe the Atlas Society has helped to kind of repopularize the genre, but I think that the opportunity that we have with this AI model and that possibility and how rich and vivid and immersive those videos are, I think that is where we're going to be able to capture the most attention and get more people interested in Ayn Rand.
First of all, thank you for sharing your personal stories with us. And one of the things that really captured my attention is, well, having gone through this bullying and so many obstacles in life and still managing to stay on the path, well, different periods of life and figuring out what the path is. What do you think helped you the most, maybe before finding about the Atlas Shrugged or after and during the process? What was some of the virtue it is, or maybe a trait, your personal characteristic that helped you push through those obstacles, despite how overwhelming it might have felt throughout your life?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you actually what I did at the time, because it wasn't just that this was someone who was chasing me around and threatening to cut me up and all of that. She actually started an IHJ club, an I Hate Jennifer club. She was probably 2 or 3 years older than the class because she was disadvantaged. And part of the club was that she compelled everybody in the class that if anybody spoke to me, that she would beat them up. And so what I did at the time was I would write letters to myself. So I would just sit there with a piece of paper and I would write, and I would write about the things that I liked, and I would write about the things that I was looking forward to. And so I think that, that sort of ability to be introspective, to find a way to survive under, a challenging circumstance. And then also, bad things are going to happen to you, maybe your house won't burn down, but you're going to get old, or you're going to lose people you love. Relationships are going to disappoint you. And I think that each of us have a choice when bad things happen. I know that when my house burned down in Malibu because of arson, that I saw around me that people made different choices. And I always say that when you find yourself in a bad situation, maybe you've lost one thing, you should ask yourself, what else can you lose? You lost your house. Can you lose your health? Can you lose your relationship? Can you lose your job? Can you get distracted when you're driving and lose your life? So I think that when a bad thing happens, you just have to, get organized, make a list, then make a list again, and then just kind of type through it. And I think it's also important, I always say, and I think this is important when it comes to objectivism and the different perspectives on objectivism. I always say, to be objective, you must have perspective. And I think that having the perspective of how very fortunate we all are, and certainly how very fortunate I was to come from a particular family and to be an American. And I think perhaps that early experience in India, if, even unconsciously, had given me a perspective that these are first world problems.
Hi, thank you. You mentioned with the last question as well, you grew up in a society where the better or the good was attacked, or the virtues. I don't want to go into West versus East or cultural debates, but it is, I believe, very apparent that in the West it is easier for the virtues to rise, and in the East it is a bit harder. I also come from a country where the better people are attacked because they tend to succeed more than the others. How do you think that in those cultures where the better people are attacked, we can fight against that, or we can uh, fight against that culture of bad people or people with average success attacking the successful and trying to sabotage or prevent them? How do we fight against that tradition
Yeah,
within
what I would
those
say
cultures?
is that, and I know I was in Australia giving an award to Gina Reinhardt, and like that's another country where their tall poppy syndrome and envy and this kind of enforcement of mediocrity. The best thing is going to be to get them to read Atlas Shrugged and to popularize Ayn Rand and to get their most excellent, their most talented, most successful exemplars to stop apologizing for their success. And, if you ever have an opportunity where you're at a speech and somebody's getting an honor and they're saying, oh, well, it's my honor to be able to give back, and ask them, what the heck did you take away? You've given us so much. We should be giving back to you.
Hi, I'm sure everybody in this room is very aware that the sort of Reagan-Thatcher era of a freedom-loving political right is very much in decline with the rise of the sort of populist radical right. I'm curious where you think and why you think the liberal movement is losing ground on the right, and if we can't recapture that part of politics, where do we go?
Well, I think that we have to be careful with our terms, right? So the people who would like to control the narrative, okay, they no longer do because we're in this digital age, and Martin Gurry has written about this in The Revolt of the Public. They will call anyone they don't like a populist, right? So, and that's why we were having a debate, and I was saying don't use the words misinformation or disinformation, because those are words by those who like to control the narrative, to say that anything that they don't like is misinformation. Things are false or they are true. And I think populist is another one of those terms. I mean, Javier Milei is a populist, right? So I think that part of what you see with Javier Milei and with Donald Trump, with their sometimes bizarre behavior and antics and even the crazy hair, it's not an accident. I think that part of it is a intentional signaling that I am not like the establishment. I think that there's such a profound disappointment with the establishment, with institutions that once had the ability to control how we thought of them and demand respect, that now that respect has been taken away. So I think there is nothing to be, charisma is very, very important. I do believe that it can be cultivated. I think it can be. And so I think that, the successful leaders of tomorrow will need to learn how to cultivate. I would recommend to every single one of you, somebody sits down in front of you, practice your conversation skills. Somebody asks you a question, ask them a question. You don't feel like it, do it anyway. Start practicing your communication skills, join Toastmasters, figure out how to be a more compelling communicator, and do it because you care about the ideas that you are communicating. I worked at Dole Food Company, and one of the women that I brought over to work with me at the Atlas Society was my secretary there, my executive assistant. And she remembers all of those years that I would close my door and I would tell her, just if anybody wanted a meeting, send them away. And she knew that at my heart, I'm an extreme introvert, and that I even, when I have to go out and be at conferences or whatever, I have to take little charisma breaks in order to reset. So when she came to the Atlas Society and she saw me out there glad-handing and giving speeches, going on the media, she was like, who are you and what have you done with my boss? And I said, I'm doing it because I have to, because we have to win. We can't let the vandals win. We can't let the moochers and the looters win. We can't disappoint and be unjust to the men of the mind, to our most productive, most benevolent, most creative geniuses. And this is something that I feel passionate about. So I would say that to each of you. I mean, you're here because you care about these ideas. Then you owe it not just to yourself and not just to Ayn Rand, but to the ideas, to find a way to be a good example of them, an inspiration, you know? I mean, if nothing else, you can change hearts and minds by the kind of life that you lead, by the kind of way that you carry yourself, by the kind of image that you present to the world. And so I like to say, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. So take every single opportunity, and that includes being here at this conference. If someone's sitting down next to you, talk to them, ask a question, make a fool of yourself. Be willing to do it in order to improve and get stronger and be a better advocate for these ideas.
Hi, thank you very much, firstly, for the opportunity to enjoy the company of like-minded people here in this spectacular city. You mentioned that, of course, you had numerous meetings to provide us with such an opportunity, but as I remember, you didn't mention how many times you get rejected, and could you please share with us how often do you get rejected, or how many times did you get rejected?
Probably 9 times out of 10. Yeah. So, you know, you got to have a pretty tough skin. And that's why I also appreciate the MC saying, you know, when you spend as much time in crummy hotels and on airplanes as I do, in order to raise the money to put on something like this, the last thing I want to see is somebody, you know, on their phone. The thing I want to remember the next time I have to push through that no or that canceled flight is, you know, your smiling faces and all of the wonderful questions that you ask. But, you know, it's interesting. Before I was saying having the experience of playing all of the instruments in the symphony in order to be able to conduct. The one instrument I never played was sales or fundraising. So that was one that I needed to learn from scratch, and I'm still learning, and it's very difficult. But if there's anybody in the audience who wants to do fundraising for a nonprofit, I encourage you, because they make the most money, they're in the highest demand, and you'll, you know, have job security forever.
Well, in the past, we saw that the communists and the dictatorships just fall out. But right now, when we take a look to the globe, we saw that the mixed regimes, that they're not totally dictatorship, they also use the benefits of the capitalism. So it becomes them to be fall down really, really hard because they are more sustainable than the communism and the dictatorship. And we saw it like the Eurasia, like also in the East Europe in the same time. So what do you think about the future? What will be we saw in the future? And what will be your advice to be the objectivists that live in that mixed regimes and also who are not be able to immigrate or get a visa for a free country, because there are many of us who in the same condition right now? Thank you.
Well, it's very difficult when you're in a situation and you can't escape. But I would say a lot of these regimes are a lot more fragile than we give them credit for. I know that our president and conservatives like to talk about China, 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 and it's the biggest threat. But I think that even China is more fragile and more vulnerable to the forces of protest and dissent. And I think that it will temper them to the foreign adventurism that many people are worried about. In terms of living within a difficult authoritarian semi-state, I would try to see where you can carve out areas of freedom, but I also believe that you should think about what is your default, what are your gifts, what are your skills, what are your strengths, and what do you enjoy doing the most. I think that if you're able to find a way to succeed in any field, that you will at least be able to maybe buy yourself more protection and also be able to attract others to you that make your journey a little bit more or a little bit less difficult.
Thank you so much, Jack. That was the last question, but Jack's gonna be around, so you can still ask her if you didn't get to. Now can we give a big round of applause? Okay, one selfie.